So I'm going to show you how to sew your patches, and this is what you're going to need. So this is from Tandy Leather. These are Glover's needles. There's hand sewing thread. It's linen carriage thread. And it says 0.55 millimeters and 100 yards. I prefer a little bit thinner thread than this, but it'll work great. And then you need to wax your thread so that it comes through the leather nice and easy. So that's what you're going to be using to sew. Now, as you notice, they're still all kind of in their package. I was fortunate enough to get a little bit different supplies at one point, and so that's what I'm going to use because that's what I'm comfortable with. I haven't quite switched over to these guys yet because it's a little different from what I'm used to using. So here's that needle. And the thing about Glover's needles is it's a three-sided, I don't know if it'll focus on that, but it's a three-sided, very sharp tipped needle. So then I'll show you what I use. So it's linen thread again. It's a little bit smaller. I think it's just a 0.5 millimeter. Now I use this thread because it comes lightly pre-waxed, so it saves me a step. And this is an English thread. If you can find it, great. But it is very difficult to find in the United States. And this is the difference with the needle that I use. So the needle I use is a German needle. I don't even know if you can tell the difference. So this is the Tandy's Glover needle, and this is the German needle that I use. It has a slightly smaller eye, but basically the same. So that Glover's needle should work really well for you. So when I measure my thread, I do a length across my arm, and we're going to double it. So I always double my thread when I'm sewing these pelts. Thread your needle. I'm going to tie a knot on the end. And that usually won't pull through. Just like that. So I'll show you how to do this straight edged one on the corner first. So remember that we marked on our piece and on here, so we kind of have a guide so we can stay on track. You're going to pinch them together, and you always sew towards yourself, and you always want to double back your first stitch. Now you don't want to get really close to the edge, so see, I am, about a less than a 1/4 inch, so probably more than 1/8 of an inch on the inside, or down from the edge. You don't want to sew too close to the edge. I'm going to do a back stitch once, and I like making my stitches about a 1/4 to 1/8 inch apart. And pull it tight. And you don't want to put your stitches too close together or too close to the edge, and that's because you are sewing leather. The more holes you poke in your leather, the weaker it is, and that's also why we stay away from the edge. You really want to make sure there's no fleece on your thread, because then it's not going to pull through. And then I've been told that you're always supposed to sew right to left, but I think if you're left-handed, then you would do the opposite. And that's so you can just always sort of see where you're sewing. And you want to be really careful. So the tip of this needle is really sharp, and you may stab yourself. I certainly have. And then you bleed, and then you will need Band-Aids because you don't want to bleed all over your project. Also, because of the way this needle is, it's so sharp on its edges, the 3 edges are all very sharp, you do not want to pass this through near your thread. So remember we did that back stitch for the first one? You do not want to get anywhere near your other holes with the tip of your needle, because you can just slice that thread open. I'm going to do a back stitch at the end here. Okay, 1 back stitch back. Not getting anywhere near my other holes because you don't want to tear that thread, because then you're going to have to probably start over unless you're really clever. And then I do a knot, and when I cut the end of my thread, I leave about a 1/4 inch tail. I'm just going to tie this off again where I cut it so that I don't lose my needle, and I can get going right away on the other patch. So there is that. And what you do with this to flatten it, grab your scissors, and you're going to use the handle of your scissors to work this so that it's flat. And you're going to notice on the edges here that I didn't sew all the way to the edge, and that's because if I need to make any adjustments, if it's too large, that I have that freedom to do so. And it doesn't matter, because when we stitch our fabric together, it's gonna, there won't be a hole there that you're gonna see, and you'll see that later. So I'm gonna go ahead and patch this one just the same way, and then we're on to the next step.